Jason, my brother, welcome to the Superhuman Life.
Thanks, Frank. Good to see you again, man. I'm loving that hat. Lions, not sheep.
Yeah, man. So you're a fan of Sean in the Lions Not Sheep brand?
You know what? I've never seen that till today.
Okay. So you like the hat. So it's funny because I was telling you before we hit record. I was at an events last week, and it's just one of the hats. I just love repping it. I love what it's all about. But so many people were like, "I love your hat. Is that your brand? Is that your company?" And I think for me, because I've been repping the brand for such a long time, I just assume everybody knows what it means. But it's actually so it's a clothing brand, Lions Not Sheep, founded by Sean Whalen, who we've had on the show. It's all about like all Americans conservatism, right?
Yep.
Defending our Second Amendment rights, like becoming a lion. And what was cool was like this really came out of like he's had the brand since 2015, 2016. COVID was like pouring gasoline on it though, because the message really began to ring true to a lot of people. So I definitely think you're a lion. Hey, virtual high five right there,
Yep.
man. Awesome. But I think where I wanted to start it with you today, man, is obviously you've been running your podcast for a while. You've had some amazing guests, some incredible stories that you've had on the show. Talk to me about what it was like interviewing Charlie Sheen. Was he in person all that he is online, and was there anything that you got out of Charlie meeting him in person that kind of shocked you, like this part about this man? So yeah, let's just open up there with Charlie.
Yeah, I would say as far as getting something out of it, that power as someone in recovery myself, which I'm sure we'll dig more into, but the living amends component, if you hear people in recovery or in recovery talk about that, just the man really owns everything that he did. He doesn't blame, his addiction for, all the chaos he caused. Owning his choices with his sexuality that led to his HIV diagnosis that affected other people greatly, not just his family, but obviously, we don't know if there was anyone else that contracted it from him. All that stuff is tight-lipped, as it should be to respect the privacy of others. But he owned it. He didn't make excuses. He didn't play the victim thing, and I found that really powerful. And as far as the man himself, incredibly bright, really intelligent. You can tell he's a big reader, uh, excellent vocabulary, just beyond and like a real intelligence to him. And you can see why he was such a good actor. He had this natural charisma, seemed so incredibly comfortable in his skin. Regardless of, he's aware what people think of him, but it's kind of like, I don't know, they're not me, they weren't there, they don't know. So he just seemed to have an ability to roll with those punches and just openly communicate, his remorse for what he did that was wrong.
I love that so much, man. And I think what really jumped out at to me was the personal responsibility, right? Like that's a big theme in our work. That's a big theme in my story. That's what kind of transformed my life when I had this moment where I was like, dude, you're not anything that you're presenting to the world. You say one thing and then you live completely different. Take responsibility for your actions, begin to walk and live in alignment. And I think that's so powerful, for anybody that's seeking transformational change, and more specifically, anybody that's going through recovery with an addiction. You mentioned reading. Like, did you feel with Charlie like the reading and the learning and the growing has been something that has led to his recovery? Is this kind of post this, or was this just who Charlie was? And if so, what role do you feel reading, learning, growing, self-development plays in a successful recovery for somebody?
No, clearly talking to him, he was a person that was always very fascinated by history, especially, because the first time I spoke with him, he closed with common sense and common courtesy, and it was the lead up of everything that we talked about, that even his clarity about himself and what he had to adjust was become a person that lived with common sense and common courtesy. Um, but I think, you know, talking with him, and I was able to talk separate stuff that didn't make the recordings the 2 times that I talked with them. Um, we talked a lot about integrity too. Like you were saying that, this is what I presented to the world. This was my reality. Hey, hands up, very much me as well. And so through that, I noticed in my recovery, I've definitely become much more of a reader or audiobook person. I have about an hour commute to the nonprofit I'm at right now where I work. And, I think it's important for our development. We can never stop learning. And I don't know about you, when I was active in my addiction, not just alcoholism, but the pornography, that occupied me. I stopped learning. I stopped growing. I don't even want to know how much gray matter started forming up here from the junk that I was shoving into my mind and my body. So for me, it's an incredibly huge thing to, dig more into my faith, more into my personal growth, taking a look at understanding people's stories. I love autobiographies. So things of that nature where I can kind of pick and pull from or go, that's familiar, or whoa, I never saw it that way. I think it's really important in life. It helps rebuild empathy, which I had lost at one time.
Yeah, I love that. Love that so much, man. I think for me, my story, and I don't have the same addiction recovery story that you have, and many of the people that you speak to on your podcast. I never felt like drugs and alcohol really had their grip on me. They were things that when I was participating in them, I always took it to the limits, but never to the point where like I felt I was out of control. Pornography, out of control, but it was a way that I was able to manage it and still be productive in the world, still reading, still growing, still bodybuilding, doing all these things. And I think because I was able to do that, it was one thing I was forced to live a double life, right? I became very good at living two different lives, but it's also when I got clear and I took that responsibility, it's like I was able to make significant change almost immediately because I was working with, a 20-year background of personal development, books, seminars, reading, bodybuilding, and all these things. I want to go back here a little bit and maybe unpack your story a little bit because I think that'll help a lot of people as we're adding some context to this conversation. So obviously, you're in recovery. I think is how you still talk about it here today, and I definitely want to get to some of that how you look at recovery, not. But can you kind of take us back a little bit into young Jason's life and kind of talk about the inflection point into addiction, and then kind of take us through your journey and story here.
Sure. So I come from addiction, both sides of my family. My mom didn't personally struggle, but I've lost three of my relatives related to addiction issues. One by their own hand because they saw that as the only way out. The others just destroyed their bodies to the point where that they were susceptible to everything. And my dad who's been in recovery for over 20 years for not only drug addiction, methamphetamines. He's a truck driver, hardworking guy, very traumatic childhood, which is sad that him and I were able to make parallels through our lives. But I was exposed to pornography at a very early age. My dad was dual diagnosed when he first got treatment as a sex addict. And come to find out, digging into our story, so was my paternal grandfather, and so was my great grandfather. This was a lineage thing. So, for me, really unwrapping this sex and love part of it was started to happen once I got the alcohol out of the way. And unlike you, I mean, I had my parents did the best they could. My mom, an amazing woman, mama bear, and, shirt off her back, but at the same time, don't mess with her or her kids. Um, so they did the best they could, but I don't think with everything that was going on in society, my parents were very young. This is coming out of the 60s, 70s. So I was born late 70s. So, there was a almost a social mentality of certain things that, letting your kids at 6, 7 years old watch Caddyshack or whatever it is, or these other movies that had excessive nudity and sexual scenes and things like that was no big deal. And unfortunately for me, it was. And I found, and really digging through this trauma and the different stuff that happened to me, including a molestation between 6 and 7 years old, that I was really doing so much to try to continually connect with my dad and understand him, because through his addiction, he and I were not close. He and my brother, who's 4 years older, they had a pretty good relationship. I mean, as much as you can with someone that's in their addiction. But they were much tighter than my dad and I. And so for me, I think a lot of that was always trying to prove something to my dad and get his attention, because it was like if I would bring home the pretty girl, then my dad recognized. I didn't get much notoriety otherwise from him. And, fortunately, that stuff we've been able to work out. So I think I was always just trying to chase something to get my dad's attention. The irony of falling into a radio broadcasting career, same thing. It was the two things I got validated for. Man, son, you're doing a good job. You're funny on the air or whatever it was. And you're bringing around the pretty women. And so it was like, oh, okay. Life is being fulfilled here. And I was, I spent a lot of years just playing a role for other people, being the peacemaker in the home, um, you know, being that my dad was off on the lunar lander, as we call it, when I was in high school. I was the kid that, tried to come home, help mom to the best of my ability and just walk the straight line the best I could, not knowing that there was all these underneath traumas and depression and anxiety and not really recognizing how bad pornography made me feel. Through journaling and internal work, I look back and go, wow, that was the thing I chased the most to ease my mind from about 6 years old until 41. So it was a long time. So that's a long time to have something present in your life that you would turn to in a hard time, as opposed to emotionally being mature, trying to talk things out, finding a good support group, therapy, whatever it is, just thinking, okay, everyone else is doing this. It's no big deal. Well, I'm going to tell you, for me, it was. And I, I had to really start to recognize that once I started the recovery work that, oh, there's this underlying thing. It's so little about the substance or the pornography or whatever else it is. It's that underlying stuff.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. When you talk about recovery, you're speaking your journey in terms of substance recovery, right? Not pornography addiction recovery, but true substance, drug, and alcohol addiction. That's the recovery that you're speaking of, correct?
No, I've done some sex and love addiction work too.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So both primarily, yes, correct. The majority of meetings and things I go to, the principles are very similar. Would be, Alcoholics Anonymous, but yes, I have done some work in that sex and love addiction area as well.
Yeah, so I'm curious with you though, because I think a lot of people will look at a pornography addiction and they're like, oh, that's nowhere in comparison to drug addiction, right? Like, oh, just get your act together, right? You guys aren't real addicts. Like us drug addicts over here with a needle in our arms, we're the ones that are actually struggling. But for you, when I asked the question, it's like you immediately went to pornography, sex, love addiction. So can you speak to like how similar they are in terms of dealing with it, processing, overcoming it? And I'm just curious, from somebody that has had to really battle with both. What are the similarities? What are the differences? And why did you immediately talk about the pornography and sex versus the hardcore drugs?
So hardcore drugs wasn't too prevalent for me, although I tried a lot of them. Mine was primarily alcohol. It was readily available. I was the social guy. Guess what? I could also easily pick up chicks that way. So for me, it went very much hand in hand. But as far as with, the pornography or sex side, which I wasn't a guy that had a girl in a different town or whatever it was, but I was a guy that quickly, when something seemed to be coming to an end relationship wise or my needs weren't met, there was someone else in line quickly. Or I had already started to intrigue about that. As far as with the pornography, it's no different than how I was at the end of the day with, oh my God, I'm stressed, whatever it is, when you're fiending for that drink or a drug or whatever it is. I was feeling for the time that, okay, good. Well, no one's home. Good. I can go and I can, look at this. And sometimes it was masturbation or whatever along with it, or if it was just my zone out. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if you were ever there, Frank, but you could have like this anxiety, almost a shake to you. And then, you pop open the laptop or whatever it is. And all of a sudden, I didn't even have to get to the site yet. I didn't even get to the site yet. But the laptop came open, the ritual started. And so it was like, no different than with my drinking. I would get home and just the popping of the bottle and the sound before the drink, it went from to,
It's that first hit of dopamine that you get, right? Because dopamine is tied to our actions as we move towards something. So it's like that opening of the laptop. It's like I'm moving towards what I really want. So I'm not feeling the full pleasure, but it's like, I feel a little bit better now. Cracking of the bottle, on the way to the dealer's house to pick up the drugs, all these same things, right? It's like and if we can understand how the brain and dopamine works, it's like if we could catch it before we begin to take those steps, then we have something that we can actually work from and change.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So for people, yes, I understand that maybe it's not apparent that it's destroying us,
Yeah.
because externally maybe you don't see it as much as the addict, or when my drinking got bad, my face started to get bloated, and it was getting to that point. But yeah, it's destroying us. It's the lack
So
of
when
empathy and everything came into play. No different.
Yeah, when did the moment of clarity or when did the realization that you need to take responsibility and begin to make some change, right? Sounds like, you were doing okay, like you're doing the broadcasting, got beautiful women coming around. Now dad's accepting you. Sounds like a good life for a man, right? Like you got dad's approval, beautiful women all around you, and your voice is producing impact and change and paying the bills. So, what was that moment for you that's like, I need to make some changes now and I'm going to be the one that's going to do it?
Yeah, it really came through working with my sponsor. It was many situations where it's like, okay, I'm loving what I'm doing. This is when I had left radio broadcasting. I was just doing the Knockin Doors Down podcast, and I feel I'm getting feedback from people. This is change, but something is still empty. And we just did. It was that rigorous honesty of taking a look at a thing and like you know how are you getting a release, and what is your relaxation, what is it that you're loving about you. And it came to, well, um I'm a pretty good dad and these kind of things like that, but I was empty. I couldn't connect with anyone, let alone with a woman, now that I was sober. And I don't mean sexually, but just sitting and having an honest adult good conversation. And we through that work was like, whoa, this pornography thing has been prevalent in my life forever. And so I would go and sit and maybe try to date. This is about a year after my recovery, and I just couldn't have a real conversation because I realized I was sitting and thinking of them as an object and not sitting here trying to connect to a person. And I went, well, I don't want this anymore. This is not the way I want the rest of my life to go, with never truly connecting with another human being on an honest, open level and really being there for them, loving them, caring about them beyond my own needs. This is a person. This isn't something I'm drinking or snorting. This is a person. And at that point is when I really had to start to dig in. And it was great because it helped me with my faith, which, you would think those dark things, but it's like something about opening that up, that allowed something more beautiful in, and I just started to feel a better sense of purpose, really.
Yeah, man. Well, talk to me about what it is you started to change in those moments, right? I walk a lot of guys through this weekly, right? I walk outside and the first thing I'm doing is I'm looking for the next butt. I'm literally feeling her turn the corner, like we almost know that she's there, and then the minute we see any woman, it's like sexual objectification. So we have strategies, we have tools, we have things that we built into our coaching program. But I'm curious with you, like how were you able to begin to reboot, rewire, begin to change the way you're seeing people to no longer objects for pleasure, but like you said, these are other human beings. These are souls that I'm here to connect with, not to use. So what was that process like for you?
I would say it's no different than how I had to approach my substance abuse, because immediately would start with intrigue, much like you're talking about. See the nice butt or the pretty face or whatever it is, and I'm a big person that would tell myself out the whole fantasy story. I'm one of those people. Yes, they'll say hi to me, and guess what? It'll be love at first sight and magical, and you could just go on. And I mean, I had to stop it this morning. I'm driving in, and there's a lady pulled off the side of the road, and she's in little short shorts, and my mind goes, she might need help. And and it's like, no, she probably already called someone. And sure as heck, I see behind me the truck coming to help her. And so it's like those kind of things. It's that I call it like meditation, meditating with your eyes open. It's just being really aware of where your mind goes and learning to shut it down quick. the intrigue, the fantasy, stepping out of reality, and that was the first powerful thing I had to do. And then it was the rigorous honesty. The I'm so blessed with a wonderful woman in my life now, and she probably knows more about me than she wants to know. But when she tells me I love you, I know it's genuine and real. And so once I got genuine and real with myself, I found that I could be with other people. So that was important. The boundaries were important. You know, Frank, you're a good looking guy. I'm sure there's women that come up, they say something nice or what, flirty, and you have to learn to put it in context. Or if they overstep a boundary, shut it down. So it's developing a lot of those tools of boundaries, not only with others, but with myself that was important. And I just had to do it. And some days I got to write it out. Like, did I adhere to my values, which I had to examine? Did I operate today with integrity? So I think that self-examination was very important for me to really take a look, write it out or type it out, whatever it is, so I can go back and re-examine. And if I felt that I failed in some way, how did I do that? And how can I work to not go there again?
Yeah, that self-reflection is so important. You know, we literally have that exercise built into our curriculum. Every night, we're going to spend 5 to 10 minutes. I call it thinking about what you've been thinking about. You know, what have your thoughts been throughout the day? What are the random thoughts that you feel and experience at 2 p.m. when you're sitting at your desk? What is the thought that you have when you're driving down the street and you see the damsel in distress? Right? I know you're a man of faith. Are you familiar with John Eldridge's work? Have you read any of his books? Wild at Heart. He's got some great stuff. Incredible guy. You definitely want to check out. He's got this quote in one of his books that deep in his heart, every man longs for a battle to fight, an adventure to live, and a beauty to rescue. Right, and that's the beauty. That's the damsel in distress. That's the woman that's on the side of the road and needs help, and we want to come to her rescue. But the problem, and this is a second quote from John, is that with pornography, it gives a man everything he needs and desires physically from a woman without requiring anything back from him in return. So we can seek out a woman, we can pleasure ourselves, we can get this sexual release. We don't have to show up as a man, though. We don't have to show up as somebody that's integrity. You don't have to show up as a leader, as a strong individual. So yeah, I love where you were going there. Talk to me a little bit about your faith, man, because you mentioned that the recovery for you has brought you closer to God in your own faith. So what was that like while you were growing up? Was it a part of the home? I would assume with a father struggling with an addiction, it wouldn't be the main center of our family, but was there any element of faith in the upbringing? And then how has that changed for you since you've been on this recovery journey?
Yeah, I mean, so my mom's Portuguese, so definitely Catholic there. But and I was baptized, those kind of things, but it really wasn't present in our home. My dad grew up with nothing. I mean, my dad was living on his own by 14. When I mean living on his own, paying his own rent, had his own pickup truck, was illegally driving and doing all these things. So there wasn't a lot there. We weren't a church going family. I went with my best friend to church a lot, so Sunday school, things like that. I had an understanding of a higher power, and it wasn't that I didn't believe. I just didn't believe that there was a higher power that would love me. And this started really early on, and I think it had a lot to do subconsciously with the molestation incident. The Because I felt guilty, I felt shame. I felt like the burden. I never talked about it with my folks until the last couple of years. I've never openly talked about it. So it was, 30, almost 30 years of carrying that, almost 40 years. What would the math be? 35 years, something like that, of carrying that. And that really carried through. So it wasn't until I got a little older and when my dad got into recovery that they started asking me to go with them to church. And I had some good experiences there, but it wasn't until the last 3 years once I really put the work in to get clean, and I mean that in all aspects. I don't just mean that in the alcohol and occasional drug or whatever it was. I meant in all aspects. And so, once I started hearing some voices of love that weren't in my own voice, it was like, "Oh, boy, is this God? Because today I actually like myself. I'm feeling something different. I'm taking my hands off the wheel in my actions. Something else is guiding me. And so it felt like that spiritual experience. And then as I've kind of studied a lot of different religions and pieces and stuff like that, but it's been over like the last year and a half that it's really started to see the Christian faith is what I feel more connected to. And my significant other and her and I mean, she's just wow. Her, you would love her, Frank. Just the faith in this woman. Um, just in her sharing what her experiences started to give me a lot more strength and sense of community. I mean, we were able to with the church that she got me involved with do Ramsey's course Financial Peace. They provided it for us because they knew we were struggling. As a young couple in our relationship and having some financial troubles in moving, learning to cohabitate, move in together, and here she is stepping into being a stepmom type role. So, it's just like, wow, this is such a beautiful and welcoming experience that I had never felt before. So it not only brought an internal sense of purpose, but also in being a part of a bigger community now, that connectivity that's so important. I mean, as you know, the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connectivity, community. Yeah. So, it's hard for me to ignore when the pessimist in my brain goes, well, yeah, I don't know about this God and Jesus thing. And then I get a good reminder. I'm like, oh, all right, thank you.
I love that so much, man. And I mean, there's so many parallels and similarities in our stories, man. And that's why I was looking forward to this conversation, right? Because it was community, it was the acceptance, it was love from other men that ultimately changed my life, led me to Christ, led me to accepting that, taking the responsibility, and the rest has kind of been history. So one thing you said, I want to zero in right on that, because you said you started hearing other people, or you started hearing voices of love and acceptance. Were these audible, like auditory voices, you felt like you were hearing God? Or when you said that, did you mean for the first time in your life you heard other people tell you that they loved you? And if that's the case, what did that mean to you at that point, and how did that change you?
Boy, giving me chills on this one. Granted, I did start to get a lot of support from people verbally, sharing that they saw the change. But I don't know about you, the negative voices that we all get put there, we didn't do that as kids. It was other things. And then eventually, sadly, it becomes our voice that's telling us that. So when I started to do the work, I was hearing audibly, internally when I say it. It wasn't like searching around and like what's in the walls, paranoia, but I started to hear a voice that wasn't my own, that loved me when I mean, you could call it meditation, whatever you want, when I'd really try to have a good conversation with myself, which I know maybe some people think it's schizophrenic, but nobody talks to us more than us. Uh, so yeah, I just started to hear a kinder, more loving voice. I can't really describe it. I can't really say, oh, it was a man, a woman, whatever it was. It just didn't really matter. But I knew it wasn't my voice that was saying, you can love yourself. You can like yourself. You don't have to let these things rule you. It's, yes, you were a victim at one time. You don't have to keep playing the victim now. Move forward with life, that kind of stuff. I can't remember specifics per se, but I know that that's what started to occur.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man. I love that. I love that so much. And our relationship with ourselves, our own internal dialogue, the conversation that we're having 24/7 is something I speak on a lot. I think the conversations in your own mind are probably some of the most conversations that many people ignore. So you made the comment like, it's crazy. People watch me walking down the street. Frank is having a full blown
Good.
auditory conversation with himself. I'll be in the gym talking to myself. I'm like, it's just ongoing because I understand the importance of it. So is there anything that you are intentional about doing internally through that dialogue? Like you have a daily practice, a morning routine, a habit that kind of get in your own mind and really begin to control that narrative, because the narrative is going to happen. The conversation is going on whether or not you're guiding it. So I think for us, like if we had the ability to take the steering wheel at a certain point, we can control it to a certain extent. We can never fully control it, but yeah, is there anything you are intentional about actively doing?
Um, I try to start my day with saying kind things to myself. I'm still pretty early on in my development. That's kind of how I found you, really. As far as personal growth, wanting to find more inner strength. I've struggled with anxiety and depression pretty chronically since about 16. And so, sometimes I'll wake up and the anxiety is at a 900 and I gotta, I'll talk to myself through it. I will say kind things. I'll make it clear to myself that I am not my anxiety. I am not the negativity that's running now. And so that for me has kind of been one of the stronger things. And I try to, in just morning routine, if it's putting together breakfast, brushing my teeth, whatever it is, take a gratitude inventory. You know, even grateful for the anxiety because it's trying to teach me something. Why is my mind going here? Why do I wake up so anxious? What am I so worried about? What am I fearful of? And so I think in doing that gratitude, I try to hit at least 3 things, 5 things if I got it, and kind of move forward from there. And once I kind of start going, I'm getting to a point where my morning isn't so rushed. I give my time to prepare for the day. I think it's something I even heard you talk about, or I don't remember if it's our conversation about how you set up, and that really stuck with me is not having an anxious morning. Okay, I wake up anxious, but I don't have to apply that to how I operate in the morning. Give myself some time, a little bit to prepare breakfast. Uh, Go ahead and do whatever the morning routine things are, and it doesn't have to immediately be like a fight or flight mode type of situation, which is what I did for so long. And it's still a struggle, but I'm seeing some growth there.
Yeah, it's what 99% of people do though, right? It's like we wake up, alarm clock goes off, we're already reacting. So for the minute 99% of the people wake up, they're in reaction mode because you're reacting to something externally. Ideally, if you could create a world in life where you wake up naturally, the time that your body wants to get up, that would be the healthiest. A lot of us don't have the ability to do that because we have things we got to get to, responsibilities, jobs, so forth and so forth. But if you react to the alarm clock going off, then the next thing you do is you pull your phone out, you're scrolling social media, you're replying to emails, you're replying to text messages, you're reacting. Fight or flight is through the roof. Versus if you woke up naturally, maybe some sunlight came in through the window that kind of got you awake throughout the day. You didn't look at the phone. The first thing is you did is you practice some gratitude. Now you're framing, you're setting the perspective for yourself throughout the day. Then when you sit down at your desk 2 hours later and you're responding to emails, you're responding from a place of centered, like taking care of myself first. I've got what I need spiritually, mentally. Maybe I got a small little workout in as well. So I've accomplished all the big rocks. I've filled my cup up. I always give this analogy with like a pouring from the cup. So everywhere we go, like we're pouring from ourselves into somebody else. On a podcast, I'm pouring, into you. You're pouring into me. On the coaching calls, I'm pouring into our members. On content videos, I'm pouring into emails. I'm pouring into everything I do throughout the day. If I don't make sure every single morning I fill my cup up, eventually, somewhere throughout the day, I'm going to go to pour, and I'm going to pour from an empty cup. And when you're trying to pour from an empty cup, anger, anxiety, stress, there's nothing coming out. What can I do to get something out of this cup? Well, idiot, if you would have taken the time in the beginning, I'm going to catch myself right there because Frank, you're not an idiot. But see, the internal dialogue still happens. So that's powerful, man. I love that you're getting a lot out of there. I want to ask you something about raising kids. You mentioned a father. You mentioned your girlfriend is playing. She stepped into the role now of stepmom in the house. Knowing you come from a family of generational sex, love addiction, and just addiction in general, what things are you putting in place now through conversations, through your actions, through the way that you're creating an environment within your home to do your best job to set your kid up for the future?
Yeah, boy, that's a tough one. I mean, there's no manual for parenthood, and 2 beautiful children, and then they've had some struggles. The mother marriage to their mother was tumultuous, on both sides. So I know that affected them. Granted, we divorced; they were 5 and 6 years old. They're only 13 months apart, but I've tried to be very honest to them. I've even recently had a talk with one of my children about I'm worried about some of their self-image because it was very similar to mine. And hey, we need to do some kind of work if it's not necessarily with me, a therapist, maybe there's a support group. I encourage that, with them to be able to talk openly with in a trusting, safe environment with peers about what is going on internally that I may not have all the answers. So sometimes there's a mentor that's got to be other than myself. They're very close, especially my daughter with my girlfriend about speaking open because she feels more comfortable sometimes speaking with her. It's like, and I'm great with that. But I try to encourage them to be kind to themselves. My son, he's not too bad about the language. He's on the autism spectrum. So he's pretty matter of fact, just as is in life. Like if you want a straight answer from him, as opposed to the kind answer, you know, you can ask. But if you want the like kind, loving, here it is, the nurturing, sweet, I'm gonna sugarcoat it. You're not gonna get it from the young man, which is great. He is who he is, and it's beautiful. But I've spoken very openly and honestly with them about these things. Not just the alcohol, and dangers of drugs, especially what's out there now, but the pornography stuff made them, not too in depth, but aware of where these things led me, especially relationships that carried a lot of toxic traits, because, I thought that was normal and that's what love, quote unquote, is, which it's far from. So I've just tried to be open with them and really, really share what I've learned through the process, and hopefully it helps them. I mean, they're in those teen years, and it's kind of like all I can do is the best I can to be there for them, help them navigate these confusing times, and just let them know they're loved no matter what. And it's hard. It's tough. I worry about them, and my daughter, she's like, I don't like that you worry about me. I'm like, okay, you got to accept you don't get to choose that. These are my feelings, because I talk a lot about owning your feelings. That's your feeling about a situation. That's not necessarily what the other person was trying to portray or say. And if really encourage conflict resolution, like, okay, if you felt something that you need to talk it out with that person, if it really matters. Otherwise, you got to really take a look at the internal dialogue you told yourself about a scenario. So that's kind of the just the best that I think I can do is just be as honest with them as possible.
Mm. No, I love that, man. And I think you might not be giving yourself enough credit, man. I mean, talking with you, I mean, I'm just impressed by your level of self-awareness. I mean, obviously talking with you, like you've done the internal work, like you've done the journaling, you sat on the chair across from the therapist and probably had your life ripped apart in tears and anger and throwing like, so you've done it, man. And I think for you, it's just bringing to your kids' life the things that have worked for you, right? Conversation, regular communication about the things that are going on in your life. Make sure that they have that built into their life. Community, right? You talked about not just always looking at you as the answer to all the problems. Your daughter is closer with your girlfriend, so you create a community for them. You create safe places, and also knowing that, hey, we're going to navigate this. Like, we're going to stumble, we're going to fail, but we center eyes on the main thing always first. Like, that's what's going to guide us through these trials and tribulations within life, man. So I think that's amazing what you're doing, and I think it leads to the podcast.
Thanks, Frank, man. Yeah, appreciate that. Put a smile on my face. Gosh, when it comes from someone genuine who's done the work, and as the more I dig in and love the emails that you send, I mean, I really recommend people that are watching, if you haven't signed up for Frank's email list, do. You're always dropping some nuggets of wisdom that really means a lot, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome, brother. Well, I appreciate that, man. I really do. Talk to me about your nonprofit and the podcast. I'm looking over behind you as we've been talking about kids and parenting and family. So, podcast created and produced by parents and addicts in need. So, yeah, talk to me about the podcast there, and then the nonprofit that's kind of backing all of this.
Sure. Yeah, I had the honor of some changes happen with the Knockin Doors Down podcast, and it ended up not being a full time gig anymore. Um, and the founder here at Parents and Addicts in Need, Flynn Anderson, brilliant guy. I mean, just the work he's doing in the community here, based in Fresno, California, is astonishing. He's a recovering opioid addict, and he reached out to me and was like, "Wait a minute, I can hire you now?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Okay, well, I want to get." They had the podcast pre-existing, "Don't Hide the Scars," um, but it's just a really beautiful opportunity. I believe in what we do here because it doesn't just focus on the addict, the family as a whole, because our addictions do affect everyone that loves us. And so the work that is being done here between the parent groups, there's an open meeting that we have via Zoom or come in person where people can, it's not like maybe I don't know if you did any kind of meetings through step work, Frank, but where you go in, someone just shares their story, and then you might sidebar with them later. This is like an open roundtable discussion of people that drop some beautiful wisdom and nuggets, and it creates a beautiful community of support. So in addition to that, I mean, the fentanyl crisis is out of hand here. And so we work very closely, not only with the DA in Fresno County, but law enforcement, DEA, and even legislation. And, I couldn't be more proud than to be a part of that and bringing awareness and support to these families because it's experimentation maybe when we were younger, it wouldn't necessarily kill you, but now these kids are getting a hold of these street drugs that are laced with fentanyl or 100%, and they're dying first, second time they're using, and it's happening. And in my view, it's the real pandemic that no one's talking about. Just look at the numbers of the deaths from drug addiction. I believe it's 16 to 25 now. 26 is now the number one killer of that age range is drug addiction, and it's highly connected to fentanyl that is going out there and the opioid crisis. So we need to get that awareness out there and cut it off at the pass because we're going to lose them. And it's not a situation where okay, we can get this person into treatment and try to work that process. No, we're losing them before we ever even get them there.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here. Obviously, this is more your area of expertise as opposed to mine. But like you had mentioned, this is they're lacing your everyday street drugs. Like you're getting strains of marijuana that are laced with fentanyl. So what can a parent do if they got a 15 to maybe 18-year-old like living at home and they're like, I don't want to intrude on the kid's life here, but like I know he's hanging out and like he's in high school, he's going to some parties, like it's there, man. For a lot of us, right? You may not be participating, like you said, it was experimenting things. We were trying this out. There's no risk of like taking a hit off a bong, and I was not going to wake up the next day. But that definitely is the case now. So, what are the conversations that you guys are having with kids and parents in that teenage age?
I followed Flint's lead on this one. Be intrusive. Be intrusive. Are you taking care of everything? Granted, you might have a teenager that's working a job or whatever, but essentially you are still the caretaker. You're still guiding them. They are still your child. So be intrusive. Know who their friends are. Know what it is. Have the real conversations with them. Because I mean, Frank, what about you? At 16, I didn't think I was going to die. I was incredibly headstrong. Granted, I didn't really get into a tremendous amount of trouble per se. I kind of flew under the radar till about my mid-20s. Then that's a different story. But that invisible mentality carried through, and you gotta intrude. Know who their friends are. Know what they're looking at on the internet. Know what's happening with them on social media. I mean, do you want your son or daughter at 15, 16 exchanging nude photos? No, you also don't want them sitting there buying illegal drugs over social media, which is happening a lot. Know what they're doing. Be in their business. And if you have a child maybe that you do know is using some kind of drug test them. We've had many parents that drug test their kids. It's like, okay, you're going to have consequences for this. And one of those consequences, it's not just grounding or the phone goes away or the car privileges or whatever it is. You're now going to get drug tested. And we had a gentleman that was on our podcast who his daughter, he was afraid was going to repeat some of her patterns, drug tested her. And once she kind of got away from that crowd a little bit, she started to recognize, whoa, dad, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for loving me that much. I saw where I was going. And it's okay. You're not their friend. You're not your kid's friend. When they get older, they might become a peer, but right now they're not. They're your child. Don't worry about if they don't like you. I mean, Frank, I've had both my kids like, "You're the worst," and go in their rooms and slam the door, and later that night, "Hey, Dad, I'm sorry, can"
You're 12. How do you have
Yeah,
any comparison to what the worst in life is? Like, go
yeah.
back and I think too many parents, man, they want their kids to have this autonomy at like the age of 13, 14. Like, yeah, he's growing. He can get himself around. He can feed himself for the first time, knows how to make a ham sandwich. Like, you need to do that. Doesn't mean he has the answers to life. Let's shock some people here, man, because
You nailed
I'm
it.
I'm curious, you know, with you, obviously you have a lot of conversations. So I was talking with a good friend of mine. This is going back probably 3 weeks. He had said some things over the summer that were somewhat alarming to me. He's got a 12-year-old son, and he's like, he's got his first girlfriend. She's at the house every day for 8 hours. And I was like, Dax, that doesn't sound good. I'm like, what are they doing? They're in the room. I'm like, dude, that doesn't sound good, man. And then when they're not together, they're always on their phone messaging each other. I'm like, you've heard too many of my conversations, man. Like, you need to do some research on this. The next day I get a text message from him, dude, you were right. First of all, I was like, right about what? Because I am right a lot of times. And he sent me some screenshots from his kid's WhatsApp, or I think that's what it was. No, it wasn't WhatsApp. It was Snapchat. 12-year-old on Snapchat exchanging nude photos. 12-year-old boy, 12-year-old girl exchanging nude photos with each other on Snapchat. So let's shock some listeners right there. What's something going on right now with our kids and youth that you've heard or come across, whether through the podcast or through the organization, that most of the parents listening would be like, that is not happening in the world right now?
Uh, the number one thing, Frank, is they like to go, "Not my kid." Yes, your blanking kid, right? Right? These behaviors, like you just said about that kid, 8 hours a day? Really? At 12? I get it, but already becoming that's an obsession. Already becoming obsessed. Already becoming obsessed with the mindset that fulfillment is anything external of themselves. So, yes, your kid will jump on to, like you said, 12 years old, exchange nudes on Snapchat, talk sexually. They are getting the pornography if you're not monitoring it. They can get the drugs. You know, we've seen it. I mean, I knew kids that were 11, 12 years old when I was growing up that were already drinking. It's happening. So be aware and don't be their friends. Yes, they'll get mad at you, but gosh, they're gonna respect you. So understand it. It's happening, and we have seen numbers with the individuals because Flint Anderson here, he also owned a treatment center. That when they're getting out, one of the major things they turn to isn't necessarily drugs, but they will go out to the massage parlors, you know, for sexual activity, whatever it is. So the thing they go to from maybe is a substance right to the person. And they are. And we're seeing a lot more aggressiveness from young women as far as this stuff. 12 years old, somebody's daughter. Normally, remember how we were, Frank? It was like, you know, you hit on the girl and maybe you got a little too far and she cut you off. You know, there's something. No, this stuff is turning the mind of young ladies and they're becoming more aggressive with it because I guarantee you that young lady has seen pornography at 12, as has that young man. And where did they probably do it? Their Snapchat. I don't know how many times I've gotten something, a hi baby in Snapchat that it's, you know, coupled with you know, a nude image or whatever it is. And you know, you're sitting here blocking this stuff and all you want to do is be able to talk to your family through their shared stupid stuff. They're getting it. They're getting it. So don't be, I don't want to use insults. Be aware it's happening. And your kid, yes, your kid, yes, yours. They are not immune. They are not special or unique. They are to you because you love them, but they're not special or unique to the access of all this stuff. And the predators, be it a drug dealer, pornography, whatever it is, they want to get to them as soon as possible.
Yeah. I reported 4 accounts just on Instagram yesterday. These are accounts that are following my stories, and I click on them and they're full on nude, like pornography images and videos. Literally 4 of them just yesterday. I reported them all to Instagram. And any child on Instagram would be able to pull these pages up. They weren't, they weren't blocked, they weren't private. Any kid with access to Instagram could find these pages that were following my stories, and have literally free pornography right there on a social media website. Snapchat is just as bad. Twitter, it's a complete shithole. Like stay off of Twitter for most people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I had even somebody in it was like, I admire the work you're doing in recovery. DM me nude photos because they admired the work I was doing in recovery, and I told them, well, clearly you didn't hear all of my story.
You didn't listen.
Yeah. They later apologized. I understood this was an individual was trying to make some sort of connection, and they thought that it was. But I'm here to tell you, young men, young women, any age, sex isn't connectivity. It should be, but if you're using it as the tool for connectivity, the basis of any sort of connection, no, it's manipulation.
Powerful.
Yeah, and sad.
Yeah.
So,
What's the significance of February 15th in your life?
sobriety date. Be
Talk to me
coming up
about it.
Been coming up on 2 years alcohol free. I unfortunately had a fall off during the pandemic, and it was connected to my inherent need to people please. And it was an ex that I allowed to remain a friend. And as I was moving on with my life, was throwing the guilt trips out there. And here I am trying to people please or jump through the hoops or whatever it is. And yeah, I mean, it was really an interesting occurrence because I don't remember, and I was sober at the time, driving to the convenience store, buying the beer. The next thing I recall is I'm opening the third beer, and at that point, I got a hold of the gentleman that's my sponsor now, and another gentleman by the name of Tony Hoffman, who would be awesome. You would love him, Frank. And they talked me through the rest of the night, stayed up with me probably till 3, 4 a.m. I mean, talk about servitude and just two beautiful men, but it helped me understand the important lesson about boundaries that I needed to set and grow. So, yeah, the irony of the day after Valentine's Day, all because I had moved along.
Yeah. Well, it's
Uh,
something that in my research on you, man, it jumped out. And I just told you, I've talked a lot about the parallels and the similarities, right? Similar upbringings, both parents were there, somewhat kind of disconnected. It's provided for us. We had everything we needed. Pornography at 6 years old created this, curiosity cascade that lived with me for 20 years, 25 plus years for the rest of my life. Moment of clarity, personal responsibility. But for me, the significance of February 15th. So the day that I admitted to anybody for the first time was February 14th. The day that my life changed was February 15th. So I was sitting in a car with one of my best friends at the time. This is going back a couple of years, 2019. It was on Valentine's Day. It was a Thursday. So anybody that wants to verify this story, go back into February 14th, 2019. I guarantee it was a Thursday because I was at a gym that I used to work out at every single week with a group of men. Had the conversation, admitted to my friend Zach, committed to him that I was changing, and I was going to tell Stephanie, who was the woman that I was living with at the time. That next morning, I got up, took the laptop. I had a secret laptop that stayed in my closet. I pulled it out, walked into the bathroom where she's getting ready for the morning, had the conversation, literally ripped the laptop apart. The rest has kind of been history. So there was a lot of meaning to me to that date, and that's why when I heard you talk about it on one of your other shows, I was like, I want to bring this up, man, because once again, it's just really unique how there's been all these kind of similarities and tying things, that link us together.
wow, that gave me chills. It's a trip, but it's powerful. It's wonderful. It's hard, and I would encourage anyone, yeah, things might seem hard or a little dark, but man, when you start to get on the other side and clarity and notice those changes within yourself and your life, it's like, wow, it's like, hey, I'm going through hard times, and currently, yeah, there's some struggles in life, as there is for everybody, but I don't drink and I don't use and I don't snort people. At the end of the day, you know.
Talked a lot about boundaries here today, Jason, and I'm curious with you, maybe giving some tactical advice here to people. We'll zero in on maybe the guys struggling with porn, because those are the men that we serve through Rebuilt. If there's a guy out there and he's got this behavior, he's aware of it. He's like, I'm trying to, I'm trying to quit. I'm trying to stay off. What are some boundaries that a guy can put in place in his life if he's struggling with a compulsive behavior with porn and masturbation?
Well, I've not been asked that before, Frank. I know for me, is being aware of the places of using, you know? No different than, it took me a long time to be able to go back into a social environment where there was drinking or a bar. I just don't go to bars because I got no reason to. I guess if a friend's birthday came up or something, but I still have my rules, like, hey, sun goes down, I'm out. Sorry. I know how it gets in these places. So for me, one of the things was just setting the boundaries with myself with it. What are the places that I use? Okay, was it going to the bathroom at work? Was it when no one was home? Whatever it is, So I had to know and identify where was the places of using. And at that point, I had to start to put in my own defenses and even ask for help. I had people that was like, hey, if I'm reaching out to you, I don't necessarily need to talk about this. Maybe it's not a comfortable thing, but I need some accountability. So that was important too. Was asking for that, and it, for me, it was a bit of a process. Unfortunately, I wish mine was as cool and wonderful and beautiful as yours, just like stamping it. No, it took me a bit of a cycle to really, as my mind started to change in sobriety, to really see that, like, oh, this thing is keeping me depressed. So part of that boundary was, do I want to go back to feeling depressed? Do I want to go back to feeling disconnected? So that self awareness to help create that boundary, as well as knowing what my habits were. What is the situations I'm going to use this in? Is it when I'm alone? Is it a sneak away type thing? So identify them, open up about them, talk with them. If if they're working with you, share that with you and the people, your people, because it's only going to help having that accountability to strengthen and reinforce the positive stuff. And once it starts feeling good, you gain integrity with yourself. So I think that's important with the boundaries, the accountability and knowing what your patterns are.
Mm. And then what about relationships, right? Obviously for you, you mentioned it right at the beginning, like the opposite of addiction is not recovery, it's community and connection. So there's a relationship component tied to that. But a lot of times it can be our relationships that really feed into our addiction, right? It's like they become these it's like, yeah, we're gonna drink together. So it's like two addicts, like two best friends. It's like they're just feeding into each other. So for you, was there a process where you had to kind of clean out, the friends list? And if so, how did you navigate that, right? If you had somebody that's been close to you for 10, 15, 20 years and you realize like they're not actually serving me with where I'm trying to get in life, like, yeah, how were you able to kind of navigate that process of just making sure you're surrounded by the right type of people?
Yeah. Two things really occurred. I did what's called a digital scrub. I got this from an awesome individual named Greg Champion. Um, who works in the recovery community, and the digital scrub. So it was anything that was in my phone where maybe it was a first name and the location I met him, especially if it was at a bar or whatever. And if it was a woman and I didn't know, they were gone quick. And for me, it wasn't just enough to delete the number from the phone. I would block the number, then delete it to make sure that there was nothing, coming in those, because I had women that it was, well, hit me up if you're feeling that urge or whatever it was, So it's two people using each other. So that went quickly, and then I noticed just once my habits and patterns changed, the people that were like, "Oh man, you're out tonight, great, so good to see you," they just went away. They stopped reaching out. They did me a favor. They stopped liking anything on social media. Whatever it was, sending a text message, "We miss you, man," all that stuff. They just naturally went away. And at first it hurt. It was like, oh, these people didn't really care about me. They cared about the fun, as they saw it fun, Jason. And it was like, wow, they've done me a favor. They've put themselves exactly where they belong. I've had to do that with a few people, not many. Like I said, with when I fell off on February 14th, which was my fault, not that person's fault, because I knew we were trauma bonding, similar traumas, similar stuff. That's where the connectivity was within that trauma, and that doesn't always build a healthy uh, interpersonal relationship. I mean, you and I can talk, and there's similarities, but we're not. we're not connecting so much through those problems. We're connecting through the solution. So if you have people you're just simply connecting because of the similar problems and the problems keep going. When I start to identify that, oh, this person was a trauma bond, that was a trauma bond. Uh, if I could, when I started to set healthy boundaries and rules for how I was going to conduct my life, some people remained, some people did not.
I've never heard that described that way. Trauma bonding. Be curious your thoughts around this. I've obviously with the podcast being in the personal development space, like you see all these things, right? And I feel like trauma has become like an addiction in and of itself. Like people hold on to trauma like it's a block of gold. It's like no, the trauma is there not for you to be identified as an individual that has trauma. The trauma is there for you to learn, grow from. There's a lesson in that trauma that you must pull out, extract, equip yourself with the solution moving forward so you never have to experience that traumatic experience again. But I see so many people caught up in I'm this way because this happened to me. They begin to play a victim. Just curious, it's not a direct question, just your thoughts kind of around this whole like attaching on holding trauma as a way to hold us back. I'm a big believer in people have the ability to change. Like everything I do is rooted in transformational change. We change the way we see ourselves. We can change the way we show up to others. So I don't like people holding on to past identities. I'm just curious with you because I know you obviously spent a lot of time in this work and have had some amazing conversations on your podcast. Is this anything you've seen with people really holding on to this trauma?
Oh yeah, I mean, I personally did, so I know it to be
Mm.
a fact. Like people said, you don't so nonchalantly talk about these things that happened to you. Oh my goodness, and it's like they're not. Oh my goodness to me anymore. They did. I've learned a lesson. I dealt with it because I guarantee you. And tell me what you think, Frank, with some of the people. If you don't deal with what those traumas and underlying things are, and don't let them be your identifier anymore, because people do, like you said, play the victim. It is how they identify themselves. Anytime anything goes wrong, well, this happened to me, that happened to me. And I'm not saying that I have no empathy because I do. And I would never tell someone just get over it, but I will encourage you work through it because if you don't, you're going to continue to repeat that over and over and over. Are you in a stuck pattern of top relationships that have a lot of toxicity in them? Well, guess what? That's your fault. You start to change what is attractive to you, those things won't be attractive anymore. So it all starts with you. It really does. And once you embrace that, you ditch the victim mentality. You start to realize, wow, I'm not just a passenger in this life to these things and how it was. No, you can be anything you want to be. And I'm not talking about all of a sudden you can, become Batman, but really taking a look and being true and rigorous and honest with yourself. No, you can break free of that. You don't have to have that connection through trauma bonding, through those negative things. And it really does. I mean, don't you think like what was once attractive to me in a partner? Not even close. Not at all. So it can be done. It takes some work, but don't sit in it. Don't sit in the trauma. Don't sit in the victim stuff. Don't identify yourself that way. Forget that. That's a waste of time, waste of life.
Jason, I think that's a powerful place to end, man. I think we end on personal responsibility, just like we started with personal responsibility and Charlie Sheen. It's a great way to kind of bookend today's conversation, brother. Well, I do have one last question I want to make sure we get through here today. But before we do that, man, if people want to learn more about the Knocking Doors Down, if they want to learn more about the nonprofit, want to connect with you, where can people find you? Where are you hanging out online? And we'll bring today's conversation to a close.
Absolutely. For Knocking Doors Down podcast, like Frank mentioned, Charlie Sheen on there, Kelly Osbourne, Kat Von D, a lot of great people.
Lamar
KD,
Odom, you had
Lamar
Lamar Odom on
Odom.
there talking about
Yeah.
his porn addiction as well. Yeah, guys,
Yeah.
definitely check it out.
Yeah, kddpodcast.com. That'll take you to all the social media handles. And then, of course, for parents and addicts in need, it is painnonprofit.org. I mean, you have any questions or anything, we do help some other organizations that reach out to us for information, stuff like that, or just the individual. As a matter of fact, yesterday we were able to help get someone in treatment, start the detox process. So we're here to help, and that's like the most rewarding thing. So So please, and then, I don't know if you look Jason LaChance up on Facebook, Instagram, I'm on there. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have some pertinent questions, and I'm here to be of service.
Incredible, man. And you guys are doing amazing work. And guys, we'll get all that shared down in the show notes there below or on YouTube. We'll have it in the description box. Definitely, I'm going to check out more what you guys are doing. I'm big, big fan and supporting of the Parents and Addicts in Need, man. Amazing, incredible work, much needed in the world today. So I appreciate you, Jason. We like to end every single episode with the same question. So obviously, the title of this show is called The Superhuman Life. It is the product of my own transformational, story and journey, getting to the point where I realize we're all placed here in this world for a purpose first, but just knowing that isn't enough. We got to be intentional about how we show up and developing ourselves every single day. So that's what I mean when I talk about living a superhuman life, is the combination of those two. But I like to end the conversation with getting the guest takes. So Mr. Jason LaChance, how would you define living a superhuman life?
I think the greatest element that we can employ in our lives is integrity. And I think that creates a superhuman life. Granted, it doesn't necessarily, integrity doesn't, it includes your values and morals for sure. But above and beyond, there's something about when you say and do that can really transform your life. And I think that to me is what like being superhuman is that yes, you and I may not have the same morals, we may not have the same values, but if I know you are going to stick to the code of who and what you are, there's something really valuable in that you can lean on a person, and also people can lean on you in the time of need. I think your hat says it. Integrity plays a lot into being lions, not sheep.
And tell this guy's a professional, like for sure. The way you kind of tied all that in, brother, I love it so much. It
Uh,
rings true with the message here, man. I mean, everything today, which is why I just wanted to have you on here. I knew it was going to be an amazing conversation. So, Jason, I appreciate you, brother. Guys, if you're out there and you got value out of this conversation, first off, I want to thank you for joining us. We have seen incredible growth with the downloads, the listeners, the shares, so forth and so forth. Like, we're 3 years into this thing, guys, and we are just getting started. So you want to help us continue to grow, you can support us in one of two ways. First off, if you've been listening and you haven't done this yet, like, what the hell are you doing? Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Like, that's your job. Like, feedback, be service back to the community here by taking 2 minutes, leave us a rating. But more importantly, if there's somebody in your life that maybe is going through some of the struggles that Jason experienced in life, maybe they're struggling with taking personal responsibility, maybe they don't know who they are and they got these barriers in life, do us a favor, but them the blessing by sharing today's conversation with them. But for Jason LaChance, Knocking Doors Down, Frank Rich, Super in Life, we love you guys. And we'll see you next week.